tidings everyone, come one, come all, for in this video we are going to be covering the final 30 days of this series. If you've been watching from the beginning, know that I greatly appreciate your support. If this is your first time viewing this series, then check out down below for a link to the first part. Because you might be just as excited as I am, I won't hold you any longer. You know the drill. Day 21, Tree. The book started off this lesson with talking about tree planting organizations, so I felt like it would be a disservice for me not to mention the advice that the book gives. The book suggests that you do your own research via Google and consider joining a tree planting organization yourself. It might be great if you're looking for an excuse to get outside or if you're wanting to meet new people. On to the drawing. I had to start over this drawing several times because my guidelines weren't lining up at first. The X guide is used for the roots, so it's important to get it right. The solution I landed on was to make the X a little flatter. I definitely went more bumpy with the tree bark than what was in the book, but I think the bumps helped the drawing to look more realistic. The leaves guide was done with circles, and instead of stressing out,
oh, stress! Oh my god, stress! Oh my god!
Stressing out about getting a good circle, I used an ellipse tool to do it for me. I did this because I knew the shapes of the round leaf clusters were already a bit unrealistic, and because it would have stressed me out trying to get good circles just for them not to add any realism to the piece. I tried to get the leaf texture without flipping the page around too much, so you can sort of tell when I switch my pen around with my early attempts. Towards the end, I think I got a handle on things. I was sort of sad when I got to the grass stage as I had to cover up my details of the roots, but it ended up being a good thing as I was able to fix up the left side root that had gotten a bit too large. I really liked figuring out which bumps to emphasize and working out where to add line details to make the bark look more realistic. There is a balance of not too much but also adding enough. I like being able to test and figure that out. I went pretty heavy with the shading under the leaves, a little bit too heavy in some areas, so I had to lighten it up with the erase tool to help ease the transition of going to a lighter shadow. This is a plus of digital art that you don't really get with traditional art. If you end up going too dark, you can always go back. With an actual pen and paper, it's not that simple. The root shading was pretty basic. I mostly just followed the book. Shading in the whole tree definitely helped the shadows to look like they belonged and added to the tree's texture. For the leaf detail, I tried to keep it balanced while not looking the exact same on both sides. The back leaf shading was pretty simple, just make it all dark because it's covered in shadows. The front took a bit longer to do as I was figuring out how the shadows would land on them. I didn't really love the look of the leaf shading, it just didn't look like it quite fit the drawing. I ended up doing a similar strat as when I did the tree's bark detail. However, this time I turned the opacity down to just 10%, so it would be barely visible, and I personally think that it really improved the drawing in a subtle way. Day 22. A room in 1-point perspective. Today is our first time covering perspectives. We are starting off easy with 1-point perspective. I say this is easy because I think I might have done this in elementary school art class. I have a faint memory, but no clue if it's real or something my brain made up. For the square, I ended up using a digital tool to get it to be a perfect square as I was having a bit of trouble getting one I liked on my own. Also, for the lines on this day, I did end up freehanding them instead of using the line tool, but they still turned out pretty well. There is one problem line. If you look here, you can see that the line doesn't match the corner. At the time, I wasn't using the line tool, so I didn't really know how to move it in perspective and line it up with the corner. In the future, I end up using the line tool as Mark Kessler mentions using a straight edge to get straight lines. I used a lot of guidelines that just ended up getting erased, as that's what the book recommended. I do end up figuring out a digital workaround in the future though. The window is similar to when we were making houses, except this time it's from 1-point perspective. When I was doing the stairs, I got a bit nervous because there were so many lines going on. However, they were all definitely necessary to bring the work to life. Because I freehanded them instead of using the line tool, I did have to fix up some of the lines. I shaded according to the book, however, I feel like it made the window feel empty, like there needs to be some shading around the window or something to make it make sense. Although, using my current skills, I can't find anything wrong with it. At first, I was so confused how Mark Kessler did the floorboards. I wondered why he didn't explain it or anything. However, after drawing the perspective lines, I realized that's how he drew them. In hindsight, it makes a lot of sense as that's mostly what the lesson is about. But it was also kind of a confidence boost to see that my eyeball estimates weren't too off. In the book, they had some lights on the ceiling. I didn't draw the lights not because it felt challenging, but because it wasn't really something that interested me. I didn't really have an image in mind for what I wanted them to look like or anything, and I didn't think I was missing out on much by not adding them. Day 23, a city in 1-point perspective. When I first did this drawing, I freehanded just like I did with the previous day, but when I duplicated the future buildings to the other side, I noticed how tilted the lines were. I decided then to undo everything and use the line tool. I'm not sure exactly how it works in other softwares, but in Procreate, when you are making a line, if you then hold down your finger, it will actually turn into a straight line parallel or perpendicular to the sides/corners of your canvas, depending on what direction you take the line. The other great thing about the line tool is that after making a line, you can then move it around the page, so you might see lines moving around from time to time. Instead of drawing the guidelines and then tracing over them like I've done in the past, this time I simply erased the parts of the guidelines I didn't need to use for the drawing. I think because I'm drawing digitally, this is a wonderful solution. However, if you are going the traditional way, this might not work as well for you. I like how almost mathematical this drawing was. The buildings should reflect each other and everything converges into the center. It was cool how it felt like everything had a specific place. I guess it was almost like math in the sense that you could check your work to see if you were doing it wrong, because there are certain truths / certain things you had to do to make it correct. Rather than drawing the lane markings of the road individually, I decided to make it one line and then cut out the spaces. I feel like this definitely saved me from a future headache. For the buildings and the lane markings of the road, I made sure to make the spaces between them smaller and smaller as they got closer to the center point. For the back shadows, I thought it would be smart to just copy and paste the large shadow and then cut it out for the smaller buildings. I think I did end up filling smaller shadows in areas that looked a little light, but I was mostly just trying to make sure they didn't look copy and pasted. This drawing is really simple, but I like how clean it looks. It seems like a standard professional textbook drawing to me. Day 24, a tower in 2-point perspective. And now we get to 2-point perspective. Oh my goodness. I'm not sure why we weren't learning about this from the beginning. I mean, look at this day compared to day 6. It's literally the same picture.
Every day I wake up.
I don't understand why perspectives weren't explained earlier. Maybe the author thought it would have been boring, but truthfully, this would have helped me out so much. In the back of my mind, I wondered why my drawings weren't looking 100% correct. I assumed that it was because of my lack of skill. While I'm certain that would be a factor, knowing that I should have been drawing things that make sense with these guidelines would have helped me out so much with understanding 3D objects. I would have been able to picture the objects with more clarity at the very least. Honestly, why there is so much redrawing of this line is because I caught a case of the giggles. There wasn't really a reason for this. I just couldn't draw without laughing for a bit. Once again, I like how mathematical this drawing is. I definitely think I could have put more distance between the top and bottom parts of the tower from the middle to create more depth, as it ends up looking rather thin. I wanted the back shadow to all feel the same, so I decided to overshade it. I used the selection tool so I could remember where I was shading, and because I wanted to easily see the edges of the shadow, that way erasing would be easier and I hopefully wouldn't miss anything. To shade the sides of the tower, I ended up copying and mirroring one side to the next. I like the cast shadows I ended up doing. I think I could have used the vanishing points again to make sure they were in perspective, because I actually ended up deleting the horizon line and the vanishing points. I'm not sure why I did this, but they are gone. Enjoy the tower in the void, I guess. Day 25, a castle in 2-point perspective. A lot of this day was set up for the amount of guidelines I had to redraw. It definitely was a trust the process moment / a this will all make sense later moment. Because castles are very square, almost every line I drew is straight. I had to use lines for nearly every part of this drawing. However, because there are 2 vanishing points, this time we pull information for how the line should look from 2 sources. So it's almost like doubling the amount of lines we would have had to draw if it was instead in 1-point perspective. Maybe it's called 2-point perspective because it's twice the fun. Then came the part where it was time to erase and start revealing the drawing. This is where all the lines start to make sense. It's kind of crazy to think about how much removing parts can actually make a drawing come to life. I feel like, at least for me, who used to have zero art skill, I always thought about drawing as making lines or making marks on the page, and not so much as how big of a role erasing / empty space can play in a work. There isn't much of an explanation on how to make lines that are curves with guidelines, so I did my best guess for making the arch. I'd like to say I did a good job, as nothing about it really sticks out as wrong to me. I once again decided to Frankenstein the shading of my drawing so I didn't have to do it a bunch of times, and filled in any areas I thought needed it. I did the same thing for the almost pitch black shadow. The book then shows how adding the detail of random bricks can help bring the castle to life. You can see how I tried to use a brick brush at first, but it didn't quite look right. So instead of random bricks, I guess my castle is made of concrete. I made sure to add the texture to both sides even when the other side is mostly shaded in. Next, I added shadows to the nooks and crannies, made the doorway shadow fade a bit as I thought it would be unnatural to have such a strong shadow. Then, of course, we can't forget the cast shadow. I want to say that I really love this drawing. I know the castle might be too close for some people, but I like how it almost gives the work a fisheye lens look. Halftime! I realized that I never quite explained why I chose to follow this book instead of just following a YouTube video in the other parts of this series. So, I thought I would do it here. The truth is, I did start off with videos. I watched different tutorials titled for beginners, but quite a bit of them were just copy what I do. While I did learn something about making drawings, a lot of them were specific to that drawing in particular. And I didn't really know how to take what I was learning over to a different drawing. So, to try to focus more on learning, I decided to pick a topic and dive straight into it. And for me, that topic was anatomy. I know. For those who don't know, anatomy is way past the fundamentals. Anatomy is normally one of the last things people want to learn, and normally the part where a lot of people get lost. But I really wanted to learn how to draw people, and I saw many posts talking about the importance of anatomy, and I just kind of thought, why not? Now, I'm not gonna lie, drawing anatomy was really fun for me. The feeling of being able to draw a person was amazing. However, as I started wanting to draw more complex poses, I got the advice to break the pose down into basic shapes. And then I realized, oh wait, I don't even know how to draw shapes. That's when I found a video about learning how to draw, and they were following a book. For the first day, they seemed to draw a simple sphere that took them 5 minutes. It just seemed so simple compared to all the shapes I was trying to do before. And after going on an adventure to my local library to find a book of my own, I found the exact same book from the video. I felt so lucky and immediately checked it out. I probably had a goofy smile on my face the whole time, but I'm glad it led me here. I think having more structure at the start is good for when you're learning about a subject that is vast and has many areas that you don't know about, because after all, you don't know what you don't know. I already have different things I want to learn and master after completing this 30-day challenge, and yes, that also includes future videos that I already have in the works. However, with me putting my work out there and possibly making art friends, hopefully others will be able to pitch in and help direct me if I manage to get stumped along the way. Day 26, a city in 2-point perspective. This time, in order to make sure I was placing my lines in the center of the vanishing points, I decided to make them red. That way, it would be easy to see the lines and where they intersect. We are drawing more boxes again! Yay! I had to cut down some of the buildings as they started to look too symmetrical to each other. Symmetry was definitely something I had to look out for in this drawing, as making the buildings too similar to each other would make the drawing seem artificial, but at the same time having too much off balance might make the viewer feel uneasy. Having some buildings in front of the horizon line and some buildings behind it definitely made it feel more 3D. The reverse buildings, or the upside down buildings, can definitely give off Secret City vibes. Kind of reminds me of this or this, but maybe that's just my brain. I decided to once again overshade and erase the shadows that I needed to use. During this part, I hadn't realized that I had accidentally erased this part here, so I had to undo all my erasing in order to fix it. I really think shading the part of the buildings that overlaps helped the front buildings to pop out a lot more. It almost looks like the buildings were pieces of paper placed on top of the drawing. I try to make the cast shadows line up with the would-be guidelines. I believe the things I learned while drawing this will stick with me, and anytime I draw a city. I never thought I would be able to draw a beautiful urban setting, but now I can't wait to try. Day 27, lettering in 2-point perspective. I like the red dot method, so I continue to use it with this day's drawing. And just like with the castle, there's a lot of setup that will make more sense when it's time to erase. In order to keep track of everything, I erase small parts before tackling the whole line. That way I wouldn't have to end up undoing a bunch because I had accidentally erased the wrong line, like we saw with the shadow on the previous day. I think at this point it's very obvious what the end result is supposed to be. In order to get there though, we have to define the back half. I decided to go longer rather than shorter. I think I did this in an effort to show off the 3D-ness more. I kind of regret it a little bit. I almost forgot that with the 2-point perspective, there's no need to guess where the lines will be. And then I added the details of the H. For shading this time around, I used the select tool and then colored within that area. It was kind of confusing to use the select tool, and I still don't quite understand it, but it got the job done. Oops, almost forgot to add the lines on the eye. Lastly, I finished it off with the cast shadows. I think this drawing is pretty solid. I might even use it as a new intro sequence. If you have some strong feelings about me doing that, then comment them down below. Day 28, the human face. What do you mean I have to draw a human face today? I was just making letters the previous day. There's no way I'm ready for this. Oh wait, I just have to trace? I got it. Now I want to make it clear, I am following the book's instructions and tracing today. I've seen some debate on whether or not tracing is good or bad. My thoughts are, if you want to learn shading but you don't know how to draw a face, maybe just trace the face and then study how to shade it. In fact, that's why we're tracing for this lesson. How I did this was just by taking a photo of the book and putting it on the canvas in Procreate. Then I lowered the image's opacity and drew on top of it in a separate layer. In the book, Mark Kessler says that he traced the image 10 times for about 20 minutes. I decided to set a timer for 20 minutes and just trace for that amount of time. It went off when I was in the middle of tracing the 4th drawing, so I decided to just finish that one off before moving on. This time, we are no longer racing for practice, and instead we will be using this drawing for the upcoming shading. I do think this time was actually one of my worst times tracing this face, as I had already been worn out from doing it a few times prior. Most people I meet tend to say that they get into a rhythm when doing things over and over, and each time it comes out better and better. I have to say, I am not one of those people. I feel like the first time is typically the best for me, and every time after, it just gets worse and worse. I've always been alone in this, so please comment if you can relate. I want to finally meet someone that's like me. The eyes were one of the first things we traced, so I decided to start there. Because the nose and the eye were connected, I headed there next. I definitely think I failed with the nose shading at first, so I go back to it quite often throughout this drawing. The top lip was simple, and with the bottom one, I just used the shading to create more depth. A couple of times I went back and forth on whether or not to add shaded texture to the hair. I feel like it looked weird with only the face being shaded, but then I didn't like the way I was doing the hair either. I ended up with a pretty dark shadow for the chin, which led me needing to darken the cheeks and everywhere else to match. I went back to redefining some details. The cheeks area looked a little too chubby compared to the reference, so I tried to add more shading to make it look slimmer. After that, I decided that if I didn't love the added hair, then it was best just not to have it. I think I have a lot to learn with this type of drawing, but I'm excited to grow. Day 29, the human eye of inspiration. Wow, what a title. Drawing an eye. This might be just me, so I apologize if I'm making assumptions here, but I'm pretty sure this is a classic go-to doodle. I would always draw this to sort of test my artistic skill. I drew it because I thought it looked cool and I wanted to feel like I could draw, but it never really looked good and it always remained at doodle status. However, that changes today. I feel like low-key we should have covered this before the human face, but I guess the work before was mostly tracing, so it didn't really matter if we knew how to draw an eye. I go over my lines quite a bit, just trying to get the same shape as the book because this is a shape I've never drawn before, so it took me a while to get there. Once I got the main shape, the rest of the lines were easier to do. I made sure the iris was a circle and then erased it so it looked like it was inside the eye. For the pupil, I did the same thing, except I noticed that the book didn't put it exactly in the middle of the iris, so I made sure to do the same. Of course, I added the iconic highlight and made sure that was a perfect circle as well. The book starts shading a bit before adding other elements, so that's why the shading starts here but stops for a bit. I tried to make the lines of the iris a bit random here, as it seemed a tad chaotic in the book. I color the iris a bit dark before making the edge darker. I noticed here that my lines were a tad too evenly spaced and straight, so I added more lines for the sake of chaos. I think the added chaos definitely makes it look more realistic. I made the guide for the eyebrow before drawing the hairs I wanted to keep. I felt like a guide was important so that way I didn't have to question where I wanted to take the brow. I tried to make the same chaos as I did with the lines in the iris, but even with different line weights, it didn't really have the same chaos that made so much sense when doing the iris. Moving on, I tackled shading once again as I noticed it had changed in the book. Every time I've drawn eyes in the past, eyelashes always seem to stump me, so I was a bit nervous when it came to do them. However, I think I did a pretty good job at making them not uniform and making sure they curved in the right spots. For the most part. If I were to redo this drawing though, I definitely would be sure to make the eyelashes longer. When I was shading the under eye, I couldn't help but wonder
I can't help but wonder.
When I was shading the under eye, I couldn't help but wonder why the book had us leave space in the liner if we were just going to shade that part with a line anyways. I still don't understand this, so if you know, please explain it to me, whether that's in the comments or via prayer? How else are you sending me messages? Most of this shading was also done on the same layer, so it felt like I had to be more cautious because erasing would be harder to pull off. I mostly did it all on the same layer out of pure laziness, as I didn't really want to think about how to separate the shading onto different layers. I took a long time with the shading on this project, and I think it was because I was mostly copying to the book shading because I wanted to get it right. I didn't really know how I should branch off on my own, and I ended up just sticking to what the book showed me to do. After working on the shading for a few hours, I still wasn't happy with it, so I kept adding more. I was working on little details to get it to be like the book's drawing. Eventually, I realized that I could keep refining and shading for days if I wanted to, so I took a little break to allow myself to look at the piece with fresh eyes, which was an amazing move on my part. Once I had fresh eyes, it didn't look that bad. I'm not sure what I would do to fix the piece or if there's anything to fix, but yeah, looking at it, I think not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad, but not good.
Yeah.
Day 30, your hand of creativity. This time we start off with a pretty crazy guideline. At least guideline wise, I feel like it's the craziest so far. For drawing the fingers, I kind of just went for it. I didn't try to be perfect, I just tried to do the best I could do. If I messed up, then I could always use the undo button. I accidentally made my drawing a bit too close to the edge, so I couldn't make my fingers longer. I would have moved the drawing over, but I'm not sure how to do that when the lines are in separate layers. The palm was a bit hard for me to conceptualize, but I think it mostly worked out. Whoa, after deleting the guidelines, the hand looks really strange. I'm just sort of noticing this when looking back at the time lapse. Dang, those lines came out of nowhere, but they really helped. I adjusted them to be more like the books. I really liked the shading of the fingers. I think part of that was because I was very confident on where the shadows would go. It was easy to read, for lack of a better word. The palm shadow reminded me of the cheek shadow from day 28's face. I got a little nervous that I was going to make the wrong shape again, but I think it worked out well. I'm not sure what part of the palm this is, but I really like how the shadow came out. Then I continued with the fingers shadows. At the time, I was a little bit worried I wasn't doing the lighter shadows right, but looking at it from far away, it looks really well done. I darkened the same area of the palm from before and then made sure to get the other areas of the palm. Next, I moved on to the wrist. I don't know if I did the best job here, but once again, I'm looking at it from much further away and I can better see what the shadow does. I want to note that when I was drawing, I did have a reference of my canvas as a whole, but it's different seeing it in the time lapse. Maybe it's because I've had space away from the drawing, so I see more of the bigger picture when looking at the canvas. Here, I'm just touching up and refining the shadows. Oops, I almost forgot about the fingernail. Lastly, I shaded the thumb, which was simple and fun. I wish I could say I love this drawing, especially because it's the 30-day final drawing. However, just because I'm not in love with this drawing doesn't mean I'm not proud of it. When I started this journey, drawing a hand seemed nearly impossible. It felt like something only an advanced level artist could do. I'm definitely not advanced yet, but I wonder if I've passed the point of being a beginner. And yet there's still so much I don't know about the art world. Maybe advanced beginner should be my new title? Let me know what you guys think. Along with the drawing skills I got from this book, it also helped me to gain confidence. Because of this book, I might be in the planning stages of some ambitious projects that always felt miles away before. Thank you, Mark Kessler, for making this book. It truly opened up a new world for me. Don't be afraid to start an adventure. You never know where it will take you. I'll leave you with Mark Kessler's final words in the book. Dream it, draw it, do it. And that's the end of this series. It feels so weird to say that out loud. I can't believe I finally made it. Thanks for joining the ride. Subscribe if you want to see where I go next. Bye bye for now, and I love you lots. Oh my god, I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about how this is the last video of the series. Oh my god, okay. Pull it together, girl. We still got half the video.